Good day. I'm Chris Frostad, the president and CEO of Purepoint Uranium Group Inc. We're an exploration company looking for uranium in northern Saskatchewan. And I'm here today to talk to Matt to shamelessly promote all the great results we see coming out of our current drill program.
Chris, talk CPS to me. That there's a phrase I never thought I'd use. I mean, well, I sort of joke, but some people like percentages, some people like CPS. CPS seems to be in vogue at the moment, and you're putting out headlines with CPS, indicative of what for those the uninitiated and others.
Well, counts per second is what we're talking about, and when one is using a scintillometer or a Geiger counter, what you're picking up are the vibrations in a crystal that's in that piece of equipment, and so anything over a few hundred means you've got radiation coming off of that hunk of rock. Typically, historically, it's been used primarily when you're looking at core and logging core to determine what pieces of rock you need to go off and get assayed. More recently, though, it's been used to indicate that we think we've got something hot in the box here, and we hope there's more to come. So it's not a nothing indication. It's not voodoo. It's real. It's not a percentage. It's not a grade. And because crystals change from machine to machine, it's not even consistent from the unit you're using. But it is a good indication, and we've been hitting tens of thousands of counts per second in the core that we've been pulling out at our Red Willow project, and we assume that that's indicative of lots more to come, but we'll see what the drill tells us.
Okay, again, there's a lot of new people coming into this industry from technology, and they're not quite sure of the terminology. And quite frankly, I've only just picking this up myself with regards to the CPS component. It's become quite fashionable in the last year or so to talk about it. So give us, your average count was like just under 6,000 counts per second. What's that mean? Where does that kind of put this in compared to your peers? Yeah,
background counts per second I could pick up off of a building is something in around less than 100 counts per second, right? So you're also dealing with background counts per second, and also know that uranium in the basin is very, very pod-like. Therefore, you can get very close to it and not see it at all. So when you start picking up counts per second, or you start picking up mineralization in uranium of any kind, you really need to go after it and follow up on it and see where it leads. In many cases, it leads not to much, but in many cases, that's the first sign of you're coming into something big. So it's not to be diminished. It's also not necessarily to be heralded as a resource, but it is a very important indication, because most drill programs, most drill holes come up with nothing. You don't hear about them.
No, not so much. Okay, so let's kind of go with the release that you put out. Okay, so you're talking about the beginning of the 2022 season. You're focusing on Red Willow. You've given some numbers out. I mean, would you put those down as like there's a good set of data, initial data, but there's more to be done? And how are you framing that for your shareholders?
Sure. I mean, can I show you a slide?
Sure. Share away.
Because it's what I do. I mean, this is just, again, these are our projects across the basin. We're right now working over here, if you can see my cursor, at Red Willow.
Yep.
Which is on this mine trend. But, in the last year, and I mentioned this before, I mean, this is actually the 6th drill program we've had in the last year, as we've been really revisiting a lot of these projects. Some of them we've never drilled before. Some of them needed to be drilled. Some of them need to be followed up on. So, and we after Hook Lake a year ago now, we've since drilled had two different programs at Red Willow. We've had one up here north at Umferville, one up here at Henday. And, we've said all along, these are advanced projects. These are projects that, we're following up on real results. And I think in all of these cases, we've been able to identify uranium in our core and start to reprioritize these things. And now a lot of the priorities of last year, unfortunately, had to do with where we had permits, but nonetheless, it was work that needed to be done. where we are now up here at Red Willow is we're looking at an area called the Osprey Zone. I'm just going to advance this here. So what this line is you see come running up here is the graphitic conductor, which is our primary target. And our initial drilling is down here at this bend, if you will, and this is where we were picking up started picking up high levels of mineralization along this structure. And we're starting now to move up to see where it opens up, hopefully where it opens up into something significantly larger. This area between this southernmost drill hole and where we are at the point of our release is about 325 meters. So these aren't small step outs, and we've got about 2 kilometers of target to keep looking at as we head to the north. So now that we're coming into this uranium, now that we're coming into this mineralization, and it's narrow, flat lying, and we're following it along, and we understand the geology, we see that it is very reminiscent of what we saw as we were moving into Spitfire, as we started to get into there, and we're looking for that structure as we move along here that represents that area of deposition where it would have made sense to see a much larger deposit.
Is that typical? Because they're not very big widths, right? You're talking 0.5 meter to 1.5 meters, which doesn't seem like a lot. It's a kind of like a shear. Is that typical of that part of the basin?
Right. So yes. I mean, this is where uranium has come out of mobilization. I mean, you're looking at something that at some point, bazillions of years ago, was mobilized because of a lot of heat, a lot of oxygen. And when the oxygen comes out of it, that's when you start to see it depositing. It's like a trail. We've it's a trail of uranium that we're following, hopefully, to see where the beast sits. But that's what we're into. And we do see, interestingly enough, that all of this, and we saw this on the western side of the basin too, is all happening about 50 meters into the basement rock. And that is the point at which the oxygen comes out of it completely. So it's there, and then below that we're starting to see the bigger the bigger finds of uranium.
Right, and you've talked about 7 holes drilled, quite shallow drilling. At that, you were nearly just under 1,300 meters drilled. Is that again typical of what you're going to be doing? So these shallower, cheaper drill bits. Because I noticed you didn't raise much money. You raised about $1.4 million, back in December, right? So which is your style? It seems to be your style of raising. Just raise enough to keep you going.
Yes, it's typical of this area. This project sits right on the edge of the basin. Half of it's in, half of it's out. And as I've said before, the basin is a bowl in the Canadian Shield that's full of sandstone. So around the edge, you're much shallower. So this is very shallow. And actually, now that we've got going and got a pace going, we're drilling holes it's taking days, not weeks, to drill a hole. And because it's uranium we're looking for, we are literally planning the next hole, after we've seen the one we're in the middle of. It's that kind of a thing. So it's a work in progress constantly.
But what are you working to? Because I'll come back to the money. Okay, $1.4 million, and you raised money twice last year.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Small amounts each time, just to kind of get you moving through it. In fact, I've got a question for you in a minute about why that. But these are you're going along this mineralization. You're chasing these grades, these CPSs. To what end? You're trying to find the kind of the payload, as it were.
As this uranium is moving, right? There's a mineralization event occurring here. Uranium has been mobilized and it's moving through the area, and it's leaving a trail, if you will. What you're looking for is that structure in the basement rock where it would have come together and come more out of oxygenation, right? And found. So if you look at other deposits like a MacArthur, which is sitting at a thrust fault in the basement rock, and it's got that home that it can deposit in. Or if you look at NextGen's Arrow deposit, you can see that it's a big structure that goes deep, and that's why it goes much deeper than Fission's, which is lying flat, and it was running along a structure that went in that direction. So it doesn't happen without structure, without a proper, complex structure that allows this uranium to gather in one particular place as it's moving.
Right. So we know what is the budget for drilling? I mean, how many more meters will you be drilling, and what do you need that to show you before you go and raise more money?
Oh, well, we've got money in the bank to last us the year if we need it.
That's easy. That's easy. If you just don't spend money, you got enough money for the year. But I'm trying to what would you actively want to try and achieve?
Well, in this particular case, we want to get as much of this area covered as possible. We're taking rather large step outs to understand the area. Obviously, we're hoping for every drill hole. We're hoping to hit a deposit. That's what it's all about. We're just hoping the weather holds out to let us go as long as possible and continuously understand that area and find what we're looking for.
See, I'm interested because we spoke with James Sykes of Baseload, and he when he just drilled one hole, talking about really nice CPS data from that. And he goes, "This is a discovery, one hole," which it was difficult for me to understand that. Mm-hmm. How do you go about making this? What does it need to look like for you to say this is a discovery? So when your press release comes out, we can go, that makes sense. That's what they've been hunting.
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, and we've been drilling for a long time, and we have drilled into a lot of different aspects of mineralization. I mean, Spitfire is a good one where we actually ferreted out a deposit. But you don't know how big these things are going to be or how small these things are going to be until you're done drilling them.
No, but what does it need to look like
for a discovery?
You go there with an idea and say, you don't know how big they are. Great, that's a nice problem to have. But what is too small?
These days?
Yeah.
Well, I can say that the majors who typically were looking for 100 million pounds have now upped the scale to 150. So as far as they're concerned, if it ain't 150 million pounds, good luck. And, keeping in mind that a mill, is going to cost you $1 billion up there. Unless you already have one in your pocket, it's good luck. Now, having said that, there are new ways that have been developed recently from the mining aspect up there. And Wheeler River at Denison's one of them in terms of the ISL, but there's others as well that have been coming up that are going to make it much cheaper to mine. But what is big enough to actually call a mine? Hathors came in at less than 50 million pounds, and it got sold to Rio Tinto, and it's been mothballed. So, realistically, you have to be looking at something between 50 and 100 million pounds minimum.
Right. Okay. So, okay. And how many? This is what I need to try and understand. With smaller companies, they're kind of capital constrained. It restricts their ability to do as much drilling as they want to do. I'll come back to this, and maybe it's a nice time to ask you, why didn't you go and raise a ton more money? Why $1.42 million?
Well, again, we've talked about this before. In Canada, if you're exploring in Canada, we have access to what's known as flow-through raises. And what that is, it's the government's way of promoting exploration in Canada. Because as an exploration company, we don't have revenues. Therefore, we've got all of these expenses that we can never write off, or not in the near term anyways. So what the government has said is, if you issue flow-through money to do exploration, then you can renounce, if you will, those expenses to the investor. So if you buy $100 worth of my flow-through shares, I can give you a tax receipt for $100 deduction. And that encourages investment in exploration and keeps us all going. And that's the easier money to raise, but it has to be spent. It's time limited. And that's the challenge with flow-through is you only essentially have a year, maybe a little more than a year, to actually spend that money. And if you don't spend it, the ramifications are crippling. You have to give back the tax deduction somehow.
Right, which would be a nice admin nightmare for you, I'm sure. So are you saying that? That's kind of an interesting thought, really, isn't it? With people don't probably consider that component to it. So what are the things that are restricting you from being able to, do that exploration? You told me you've got like 10 or so advanced projects, excluding Hook Lake and Smart Lake. why couldn't you be spending money on those? Why can't you be advancing those further?
There's a couple factors that might slow you down, like COVID, but things that might slow you down that aren't anticipated. For instance, permitting. So in Saskatchewan, permitting has not been an issue for the most part. We always whine and cry about it, but in more recent years, there has been a slowdown in permitting because of a number of factors I won't get into. But where typically in over the last 5-10 years, you've seen maybe $120 million a year being spent in exploration in uranium. In 2020, it was about 50 million. Last year, it was only 88 million. And we're pretty sure. I mean, the cause of that, for the most part, it certainly wasn't the absence of money. It was the inability to get permits in time. It was the inability to find a driller in time, or a crew, or what have you, and that can slow you down. And if it does, like I say, then you got a problem on your hands.
But can't. Well, I don't know whether it's a province thing or if it's a federal thing with regards to maybe exemptions if you can't deploy it because of lack of the permits aren't being done in time,
Sure.
or things that are out of your control, like COVID. I mean, how do those things get treated?
Well, COVID was addressed specifically by the federal government. So when COVID did come around, one of the things they did do was extend the period of time we had to spend any money that we had raised or were in the middle of raising. So instead of a year, we had an extra year. In times when, and we've seen it in the past as well, not necessarily because of permitting, but when other issues have come up, actually, when we've seen the economy drop, when we've seen investment in uranium drop, and all of a sudden, we as explorers are in danger of losing our property because we haven't spent enough money on them, because we can't raise enough money, the provincial government has provided extensions on that spending as well to make sure that we can hang on to our projects. So, the government has been very, very good and very observant as to the things that affect the industry, and they've been pretty quick to react to give us some leeway.
Okay, so back to the question of why don't you, what are you, 46 million, something like that, just under 50 million market cap. We'll go with that. Why didn't you raise? Are you struggling with permits on some of these projects of yours? Is that what you're saying?
No. Now, last year, a lot of our drilling was driven by where we had permits. That's fine. We've got Turner Lake and Red Willow now permitted up to the end of next year. So we're wide open on that in that front. That is not going to be a problem. We had adequate money in the bank when we were ready to raise a lot more money near the end of last year, November, but we saw the markets start to come off in uranium. And it was like trying to catch a falling knife there. So when we saw the share prices of not just us, I mean, everybody coming off and off and off, we reared back, and we were actually able to lean back on some longtime supporters of the company. We did raise close to $1.5 million in flow through at about a 40% premium to the market, rather than going out and doing a down round and raising a bigger amount of money. So, we've been very careful to watch how and when we raise this money to make sure that we're maximizing, our value to our shareholders. I mean, that's what we're supposed to be doing.
Okay. So, but right now you think the best use of your time and money is Osprey at Red Willow. And so you can drill to the end of the year depends what speed you drill at. I guess that's what I'm getting at is like, are you going to burn through the money that you've got now and then look to raise in the marketplace? Or are you going to, again, because of what you're seeing in the market, the uranium equity space, it's kind of flatlining at the moment, in the sense that I think since November, it's waiting for something to happen.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
So
it seems to be coming back, I hate to say in the last few weeks, but it has seems to be coming back in the last few weeks. I mean, despite, the evil overlord threatening people with uranium or with nuclear reactors, but it does seem to be coming back. And that's what we're waiting for. We're going to be very opportunistic. We're going to have to be quick and watchful of when it makes sense to raise money. And we will raise more money this year. We intend to, but we're going to do it very opportunistically. And we can, because we have adequate funds that nothing's going to slow us down from what we want to do. But we will raise money when it is opportunistic for us to do so.
Okay, before we get on to the evil overlord, as you called him, I want to talk about your partners Cameco and Orano over at Hook Lake, and also Cameco at Smart Lake. Clearly, they are busy on lots of fronts elsewhere. Have they? And you guys are managing and operating for them, but have they indicated they're going to deploy more capital this year, or are they waiting to see what the market does?
Well, a little of both. What held up a drill program this year at Hook Lake was our change of vision in terms of where we wanted to focus. And I think I've shown this in the past, and what we see in terms of Patterson Lake, as we're moving to the north, we're continuing to pick up mineralization of uranium along that trend, which is why we're all there. But what we now are focusing on is, it's called the Carter Corridor, because through our project, there's actually 3 corridors. Patterson's right up the middle. The one called Dirksen to the east was actually the one that had the first discovery hole, if you want to call it that, that drew everybody to that area. We've since drilled back out there and won't be following that up. But as we look to the west, there's a whole corridor that lies between what is the heat source of what mobilized all that uranium that wound up down at Triple R and Arrow. And it's sitting between the heat source and the Patterson corridor that we hold. So the focus now is to spend more time on that. We did drill there about 10 years ago. It was our first drill program, and it was before anybody had found anything. And as we look at those drill results in hindsight, we realized that this is exactly what we were starting to see at Spitfire again, only it was over there. We were looking for we were not looking for basement hosted deposits. We were looking for unconformity deposits. And once everything lit up over at Patterson, we all moved over there. So having said that, we're going back. But as I said before, our partners do pace us. And before we start spending money on a drill program, we will be doing more geophysical work and deep sensing geophysical work over that area. We're doing some flight lines this year. And from that, we will be developing our next drill program. Okay.
Don't you think it's about time some of these Athabasca plays just get rolled up into one vehicle? There's lots of small companies with small projects advancing.
Well,
slowly.
It had to be. Well, it was quite a while ago, and I remember sitting in front of a fund, 2 brothers actually, and the one looked at me. He says, "Why aren't you guys just rolling yourselves all up? Like there's so many of you." And his brother looked over and said, "Because if you take 2 $50 million companies, exploration companies, and put them together, you get one $50 million exploration company." So that's really a lot of the holdback. So I mean, what makes more sense, and what will probably make more sense in our case, is to start to bring in partners to help advance these projects. Right? I mean, what we're doing now in terms of drilling these projects and prioritizing them is demonstrating that there is value there and there is a lot of work to be done. And to the extent that some of these newer companies want to come in, have access to capital, and want to advance and earn in on some of these projects, we'll certainly be looking at that as well as a way to move the whole flotilla forward.
I like that. Two $50 million companies become one $50 million company. Makes you think, doesn't it? Does make you think. Should we talk a little bit geopolitics? Russia, Ukraine. There've been a few quite alarmist moments about whether or not Chernobyl is
Chernobyl 2.
Chernobyl 1, and then obviously the other nuclear power station whose name I will not butcher by trying to pronounce it. So people are a little bit nervous about what that could mean. Is it another black swan moment? It turned out not to be, but it didn't stop the thing. It gives you a sense of what's in the back of people's minds when it comes to uranium and nuclear. So, how are you reading that whole situation? What it does for the uranium space?
Well, it's always been a challenge in this industry because it's too easy to make really exciting news about a nuclear reactor. It's just too easy. I mean, look at Fukushima. After that disastrous tsunami, almost within days, the whole focus was on the power plant and not on the amazing amount of devastation that had been created around it, because it's just better news. As far as what's going on in Ukraine right now, and particularly around the power plants, I mean, people don't realize that you could run a jet into the side of that reactor, and it's been built to withstand that. I mean, that's the point. You start a fire outside, and it's not going to. You haven't got a new environmental disaster on your hands, but it does make good news. That doesn't mean that perception is not reality when it comes to what we do and the equities and the like. But I certainly, it seems to have calmed down. There was some initial reaction around that reactor being taken over and Chernobyl being taken over. But in the grand scheme of things, I don't see it being a long-lasting issue. Certainly, Russia has more effective nuclear reactions to undertake, other than trying to use a reactor as a problem.
Right. Okay. So that was the sensationalist component to that. But what about the kind of Russia more broadly in the region? Obviously, we saw them recently coming to the aid of the Kazakhs. We've always talked about the need for when are we going to start seeing contracts coming back again, and all of these things, such as the unrest in Kazakhstan, the unrest now in Russia, all of these things are driving back to the utilities that they have to get surety of supply. We've got to get contracts in place. Nobody's going to sign a $30 a pound uranium contract anymore. And that's what I see happening. I mean, you look in the United States gets half of their uranium from Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and Russia. And the more problematic things become, that means utilities have to start looking elsewhere to make sure that they're shoring up their supply, and that alone will get proper contracts moving. And on top of that, the fact that Cameco has already signaled the fact, and they've got more visibility in this than any of us, that yes, we are in a contracting cycle, and this is happening behind the scenes. I mean, 60% of the uranium that's sold is under contracts, off-market contracts that we never see. So obviously they see that action going on. So all of these things, I think, are, although the markets may react immediately to it because they're not sure, is that a good thing or a bad thing or what just happened? I think overall what we're seeing, all of these little things are gathering up steam to ensure that contracts will now go back to where they should be in terms of being written 5-10 years out. Proper pricing, and I think it's just getting us faster towards a place where we're going to see rising uranium prices. I mean, do you think that it's just a case of moving the pieces around on the board game, in the sense that Russia, Kazakhstan, who've already got an agreement to feed into the Chinese system, is really a case of East versus West again when it comes to energy security and in relation to uranium and nuclear?
Well, it has to be visible. Like, right, the market can only react to what it can see, and like I say, most of these contracts are off market, so you don't really see what's going on. And I think yes, you're right. We're shuffling the same deck chairs around half the time, but in this case, I think it's forcing a lot of these contracts out into the light. Uranium, the U.S. does have 25% of the world's reactors. They're using most of the uranium, and they produce very little of it domestically. And they're not going to increase that domestic production overnight. Therefore, they're going to have to start buying elsewhere, on and on. So it's rattling the deck chairs and moving them around, but I think it's making a lot more visible to the markets as to where this price and getting the price back up to where it should be.
Well, price is one thing, but actual physical supply is another. I'm sorry, you mentioned, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Russia, they are 60% of the market in terms of producers, right? And if those guys go east to China, there's not a bunch of producers left in the West, in the sense other than near-term developers in, say, Africa, and maybe some pressure is exerted on Canadian developers and explorers, because
it certainly does shine the light back onto Canada, because Canada is, we're somewhat neutral in a lot of this stuff. We're open for business. We're the easiest jurisdiction in the planet to mine in, and we've demonstrated before that we've got more uranium than we know what to do with. So I think there will be a lot of of effort towards increasing production in the U.S. However, that's going to be a tough pull. They certainly can't. It's a lot of money, and they can't move it fast enough. We can. We've got the reserves in Canada. We've got we've got this big warehouse of stuff. We just have to keep looking. So I think more than ever, Canada, Saskatchewan is going to be where the spotlight shines as the safest, best, most secure place to buy uranium.
If you can get those permits.
If we can get those damn permits, yeah. We got ours.